Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are at this time. I'm Carol Williams, and I'm the co-chair of the IAEG. And on behalf of myself and Albina Chua, I'd like to welcome you all to our first open IAEG-SDG meeting of 2021. This, of course, is not our first open meeting since COVID-19 hit the world and made us all go into a virtual existence. This is our third virtual meeting of the open meeting of the IAEG. So our program today focuses on leaving no one behind, data disaggregation for SDGs. And certainly I think we can all say that COVID-19 has shown us that that vulnerable groups have been hit particularly hard by the pandemic. And so that's even more emphasis on ensuring that we can disaggregate data for the SDGs. So we're going to have presentations from a range of participants covering methodological work, advocacy, guidelines, and tools to help us all be able to disaggregate more data for vulnerable groups, so to ensure that we leave no one behind. The second half of our program includes examples of reporting on and methodological development on SDG monitoring more generally. To let everyone know how the structure of the sessions will go, each session will have a presentation, and then there'll be a short question and answer period. And we'll also have some time at the end of this meeting to address some of the questions that were submitted when people registered. So we received quite a few questions from registrations, and so we'd like to address a few of them. So I'm now going to turn to our colleagues at UNSD for our next agenda item, which is the updates on the outcome from the 52nd session of the United Nations Statistical Commission, which took place at the very beginning of March. So UNSD, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kara. My name is Yong Yimin. I'm from UN Statistical Division and serve as the Secretary of the IAEG-SDG. So I will quickly go through the 52nd session of the UN Statistical Commission and particularly on the decision related to the IAEG-SDGs. Next slide, please. So it's just maybe a quick overview of the 52nd session in numbers. This is the first virtual session that we had. So we have more than 1,000 delegates registered, and so 800 delegates from member states and 200 delegates from agencies, and also 135 countries registered through the e-delegates. We also know that there's some countries actually attended the meeting but didn't register. So the total number of countries attended the Statistical Commission is over 135. There's a 54 agency attend this meeting, and we received more than 500 written statements through the process. And next slide, please. So in addition to the commission itself, we had 63 side events, including 50 open side events and 13 closed events. So this event spread out from beginning of February to end of March. So the average attendance of the open meeting is close to 200. It's a range from 62 to 400. So this is very successful session of the commission. And so the lesson learned from the commission is it's really good to receive the advanced submission of the written statement. For example, for the IAEG-SDG paper, we receive more than 40 written statements in detail, so which provide the IAEG a lot of future guidance on our work. And we also look at and explore the planned intervention and the speaker list, and also convince side events virtually and prior to the commission to allow broader participation from the National Statistical Office and other partners. So next slide, please. So look at the draft decision. The draft decision was adopted on 10th March 2021 after a 10-day silence procedure. And we provide link to the decision. We'll upload this presentation online and later on. And you also can find the decision probably on our website very soon. Next slide, please. So here I just go through the decision and that on the report of the IAEG-SDGs. So basically, the statistical decision welcomes the report and commend the group for its continued work on the implementation of the global indicator framework and expresses appreciation for the progress made on the regular review of methodological developments and issues related to the indicator and their metadata. Welcome the creation of the subgroup on metadata to improve the quality of metadata and facilitate better implementation of the indicator framework. So encourage piloting of new indicator methodologies in countries with different contexts to improve capacity, ensure acceptability and feasibility of implementation of the national at the national level. Next slide, please. And agreed to the proposed annual refinements. There's a annual refinements, and encourages the IAEG to continue implementing and refining indicator, and further requests the IAEG to work with relevant custodian agency to develop and test the methodology for indicators on sustainable tourism. And welcome the dedicated work by the group on COVID-19 challenges and SD monitoring, and the background document on COVID-19 and the global indicator and the global SDG indicators as useful and timely resources for country to help identify SDG areas highly impacted by the pandemic. So express its appreciation for the progress made by the 3 working groups, and also took note of specific comments addressed to the 3 working group on the work going forward. Next slide, please. And the Commission welcomes the dedicated work of the group on data disaggregation, in particular, the establishment of a task force on small area estimation, and took note of the development of a compilation of tools and resources and the practical guidebook for data disaggregation. So encourage further work on data disaggregation and small area estimation with a view to provide additional comprehensive guidelines and tools for countries. And encourage the group to further incorporate the data innovation in its work, including integration of geospatial information and the statistical for the 2030 agenda, the sharing of experiences and best practice on SDG monitoring, the automation of data, metadata transmission using SDMX, and the development of guidelines for geospatial information and SDMX. And stressed the need for enhanced technical and financial support for country to build capacity for monitoring. And next slide, please. And encourages the group to explore ways to connect and align their work with the efforts of other international working groups and bodies, including the regional commissions. And also noted the interest of some countries to become members of IAEG, and request the IAEG and the custodial agency to continue their dialogue to enhance the data flow process for global SDG monitoring, and approve the proposed work program. I think I will hand over to Kara to present the work plan of the IAEG and to how to map the decision of the IAEG with the work plan of the IAEG. Over to you, Kara.
Thank you, Yonggi. So we'll go through the work program now. So we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the following work program was stated in the IAEG report to the Commission in paragraph 29 and was approved, as Yonggi noted, at the March UNSC meetings that were held. So the work program is as follows. It is suggested that the expert group carry out the following activities between March 2021 and March 2022. First, focus on the implementation of the indicator framework, including the integration of geospatial information and statistics for the 2030 agenda, the sharing of experiences and best practices on SDG monitoring, including on national platforms and dashboards for the goals, and best practices for communicating data for the goals. Encouraging data innovations, including automating data and metadata transmission using SDMX, and reviewing and making recommendations on capacity building for the goals in coordination with the HLG PCCB for the 2030 agenda. Next slide, please. Regularly review the methodological developments and issues related to the indicators and their metadata, and improve the overall quality of metadata for the goals indicators through the program of work of the metadata subgroup. Continue the work stream on data disaggregation in order to provide further guidelines and liaise with other working groups and existing mechanisms for the data disaggregation work. Continue the work of the working groups on SDMX, geospatial information, and measurement of development support, and review the work plans of the working groups to ensure that they are in line with the work of the expert group. Hold quarterly open meetings and the 12th meeting of the expert group in the 4th quarter of 2021, and continue to interact through monthly meetings. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the statement recommendations, and these will be considered by the IAEG-SDG when finalizing specific outputs of the work program for the upcoming year. So the IAEG-SDG received over 40 statements with specific recommendations on the work of the group in the following areas. So these are the statements from the Commission: data flows and working with custodians, countries on data collection and best practices, SDMX and geospatial working groups, handbooks, and capacity building, measurement of development support working group and indicator considerations, data disaggregation and small area estimation, capacity building and financial support, and the meetings and working modalities. Next slide, please. The IAEG-SDG work plan, work areas and action plans in 2021. We're mapping the work program and the UNSC decisions. The IAEG plans to focus on the following work areas for this year: indicator framework implementation, methodological development and metadata review, and this will be done through the metadata subgroup, data disaggregation, including small area estimation, continued dialogue with custodians, countries on data flows and data collection and best practices. The IAEG-SDG working groups will continue their work, and following up with custodian agencies on issues that were raised by member states during the Commission, and other areas such as data innovations and sharing of best practices on the SDGs. So there's a lot that I just went through there, and I'd be happy to take some questions. So if there are any questions, we will look in the chat here. And I'm happy to give more detail on anything if somebody wanted to have more detail on anything on the work plan that didn't come across as clear. So I know that people maybe are unable to speak, but if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Okay, I don't see any questions. UNSD, do you see any questions or anything there?
No, there's no questions from the chat.
Okay, fantastic. I guess that means that was clear. Okay, so we're now going to start the session, the meat of the session, which is on the data disaggregation. So we're going to look at data disaggregation initiatives with 4 presentations and a QA at the end of this session. So if there are questions during this next session on leaving no one behind, data disaggregation initiatives, can you put them in the chat as we go through, and then we'll take them at the end of the session. Our first speaker is Karen Garcia of DANE. Karen, were you able to connect? If you are, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, Chair. I think she hasn't connected yet. If it's okay, we might go to our next speaker first and get back to her when she connects.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. So on my list here, I have Dr. Mohammed Ali Lutfi, stakeholder group with Persons for Disabilities. Dr. Lutfi, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. It's my pleasure to speak to this meeting today. We are so grateful that IAEG is really taking this issue of disability data seriously. My presentation today is to present or to share with you the recent development or product we put together as a stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, which is a disability data toolkit. This toolkit comes as a result of many pressing questions and demands by organizations of persons with disabilities and even people who are working in the area of data and statistics on the national level. And as a follow-up or building on initiatives by international organizations on disability, such as the International Disability Alliance and the International Disability and Development Consortium. This is a product that has been done in partnership between the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, the International Disability Alliance, and CBM Global Disability Inclusion. In 2019, the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities launched a working group on disability data advocacy. And that working group was an opportunity for persons with disabilities and their representing organizations to come together and start the dialogue or the discussion on the significance of disability data in the field of in light of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this toolkit came as a result of these questions that have been raised through the working group. And the toolkit actually discusses 2 matters. Number one, it starts with emphasizing the need for disability data, as we see that there is a lot of gap that policies have not been addressing when it comes to disability rights and the connection between disability and inclusive development. And also, there are lots of community-driven data that National Statistics Office have not yet recognized then and haven't been able to benefit from. There are lots of successful stories and best practices on disability data, especially by organizations of persons with disabilities as experts on the issues that persons with disabilities go through. And also, they are key agents in generating community-driven data. And the second one is, after we collect the data, the question is, what do we do with the data? So data on disability needs to be analyzed, it needs to be disaggregated, and needs, most importantly, to be trusted. So this toolkit brings, as I said, or presents best practices on how to collect data, how to disaggregate data, And also, it's an opportunity for ensuring the integrity of organizations or persons with disabilities that are working in the field of collecting data, and also, or most importantly, is it's an opportunity to develop messages on disability data advocacy to influence policymakers and National Statistics Office and experts on national, international, and regional and international levels to actually complement statistics and policy development. So the way forward, what we are now doing, we actually we have been working on translating the toolkit into Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. And we are so proud that we have also produced an abridged version of the toolkit in sign language. And also there is a strong possibility for producing the toolkit in German and easy language. Now, what we are hoping to achieve is the following goals. We would like to continue conducting training on this data, targeting organizations of persons with disabilities, as well as statistics office, National Statistics Office, and data experts on many levels. And also, we would like to target organizations of persons with disabilities, number one, to make sure that we have the knowledge on the significance of disability data and how we can develop disability data advocacy messaging. It's an opportunity also to address the gaps in policies that are very relevant, and also to share successful stories and best practices that are that have been generated through data collection, and also to address and conduct more effective disability data advocacy. And with regard to National Statistics Office, this toolkit aims at giving National Statistics Office the opportunity to learn disability awareness and understand the significance of disability data in terms of policy development, and also the significance of this disability data disaggregation in terms in filling the gap and complement ongoing statistics programs and policies. And of course, the most important thing is to maintain this dialogue between organizations of persons with disabilities, and National Statistics Office on how they can work together on data collection, how the National Statistics Office can benefit from generating efforts of community-driven data by organizations of persons with disabilities. Again, at the end, I would like to thank you all for this opportunity to IAEG, and we are very much looking forward to continuing our collaboration with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lopey. I think, as you noted, disaggregation for disability and persons with disability is very important to ensure that we leave no one behind. And very happy to hear about the toolkit that has been developed. I don't believe we have Karen with us yet, so we're going to go right to our next presenter, Ms. Clara Aida Khalil from FAO. She's going to give a presentation on guidelines for data disaggregation for SDG indicators using survey data. Mr. Khalil, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Aida Khalil from the FAO, a statistician from the Office of the Chief Statistician of FAO. And today I will give a presentation on the guidelines on data disaggregation for SDG indicators using survey data, which have recently been released by the Office of the Chief Statistician of FAO. Next slide, please. So this publication represents one of the many efforts that the FAO, as a member of the Working Group on Data Disaggregation, is undertaking to support member countries to report SDG indicators at the required disaggregation level. This publication offered the methodological but also practical guidance for the production of direct and indirect disaggregated estimates for SDG indicators having survey data as their main data source. The publication also provides tools to assess the accuracy of disaggregated estimates and present strategies for integrating different data sources, including small area estimation methods. Next slide, please. So these guidelines are particularly relevant if we think that about the 30% of SDG indicators can be computed using survey data. Only looking at the FAO, 7 out of the 21 SDG indicators under FAO custodianship can be computed using data either from household or agricultural surveys. However, when using data from surveys and national sampling techniques, to the production of accurate a small population. And at the same time, the innovative techniques that could allow to overcome some of these limitations are far from being in most national statistical offices. Next slides, please. Sorry, next slide. Hello. Okay. So the contents of the guideline can be roughly summarized. No, sorry, it's the previous one. I think there's a little delay on. Thank you. So the contents of the guidelines can be summarized by like with this slide more or less. So in a sample design context, you can either produce direct or indirect estimates for a certain disaggregation domain. We talk about direct estimates when, for the estimation of a parameter of interest in a given subpopulation, we use only observation from the subpopulation itself. Here we have two main issues. The first is that most often the sampling size of a survey is not large enough to guarantee reliable estimates for all population domains, subdomains. And the other one is that most samples don't cover all the possible disaggregation domains of a population. So both these issues can be addressed at different stages of the statistical production process. They can be addressed at the design stage by adopting sampling designs that guarantee an observed number of sampling units for every, let's say, disaggregation domain. Or we can address this issue at the analysis stage by producing so-called indirect estimates. These indirect estimates cope with the little information that the sample information that we have at the small area level by borrowing information from either additional data sources or other domains. Of course, if we want to address data disaggregation at the design stage, we will see how this translates in an increased complexity and an increased cost of the survey. So like methods to address data disaggregation at the analysis stage are very useful and relevant because they allow to contain the increased cost of the survey. Next slide, please. Okay, so for what is concerned let's say, addressing disaggregation at the design stage, the guidelines illustrate alternative sampling strategies that can be used for direct domain sampling estimation. So after introducing the basic notation and also like the basic sampling theory, the most common domain estimators are discussed, along with their inferential properties and also like with their context of usability. In addition, model-assisted and model-based estimation approaches are illustrated, and let's say mainstream but also innovative approaches to deal with data disaggregation at the sampling design stage are discussed, such as oversampling, deeper stratification, multi-phase sampling with screening of respondents, but also marginal stratification design. In addition, indirect sampling approaches are presented, and these are particularly relevant when ones want to reach, for example, elusive populations such as the homeless, migrants, or populations that are normally underrepresented in standard sampling frames. Along with the theoretical discussion of this around these methods, also the software packages for practical implementation are presented in these guidelines. Next slide. So, besides introducing the methods for producing disaggregated estimates, the guideline also provide tools to assess the accuracy of this estimate. Of course, the measure of accuracy to be adopted will depend on the estimation approach selected. So when, for example, an indicator, so an SDG indicator is computed using the inferential properties of repeated sampling scheme, then the sampling variance is the, let's say, the recommended measure of accuracy. In other circumstances, when the estimation of indicators relies on models using auxiliary variables, so like models that link the target variable to some explanatory factors, then the model variance is the recommended measure of accuracy. Then there are cases where a model-based approach is used jointly with inference based on sampling designs, and for these cases, the guidelines recommend a joint measure of accuracy, so a measure, a global variance that measure both the sampling accuracy but also the model accuracy. The guideline doesn't only provide instruments to measure accuracy, but also recommends, let's say, stress the importance of disseminating and communicating accuracy measure. So by communicating, let's say, the accuracy of estimated indicators, users can assess the quality of these statistics and understand that these estimates are fit for their purposes. And disseminating accuracy measures also build trust in data, their use, and as a consequence on national statistical systems overall. Next slide, please. For what concerns the disaggregation at the analysis stage, many different approaches are possible. And the guideline focus on one specific approach, which is the model-assisted approach based on the pioneering work of Kim and Rao, which was published on a paper of 2012. And in this method, the integration of two different surveys considered. So a small survey, which is collecting data on a phenomenon of interest, for example, data to compute a specific SDG indicators, and a bigger survey or a census, which is not collecting the variable of interest, but is collecting data on some auxiliary variable that could be used to predict the, let's say, the indicator that we want to compute. So the implementation of this model can be easily explained by looking at the picture displayed here. So we have a small survey, which is survey 2 in this case, which collects the target variable along with some auxiliary variables. And this survey as a, let's say, as a small sample. Then we have another survey, which is bigger in terms of population coverage, but this survey doesn't collect the variable Y, the variable of interest, but just a set of auxiliary variable. So we use the observation of the target variable in the small survey to fit a regression model, so a model that express the relationship between the target variable and the auxiliary variable. And then once we estimate the regression model on the small survey, we project these estimates, so the estimates of the parameters of the model, to predict the values of the target variable on the bigger population. Of course, to implement this model, there are some conditions that need to be satisfied, which are not very restricted. The most basic one is that the two surveys share common auxiliary variables, and these variables are defined in similar ways. Otherwise, they need to be reconciled. Next slide, please. So this model has been applied on a practical case study. for the production of disaggregated estimates of SDG indicator 212 on the prevalence of moderate and severe food insecurity based on the food insecurity experience scale. For this exercise, two data sources were used. So the big survey was the Malawi Fourth Integrated Household Survey for 2016, which had a bigger sample. And then the small survey was the Malawi FIES survey model collected through the Gallup World Poll for 2016. And the objective here was to produce disaggregated estimates by sex, age class, and income quintile. So in the guidelines, the results of these case studies are presented along with the accuracy measures, and also it is detailed, like how to implement the model is extensively explained. Next slide, please. So the guideline conclude by providing a mild introduction to small area estimation methods by presenting the steps, so the process flow for small area estimation implementation, providing an overview of main unit level and area level approaches available, indicating the main references on the topic, and also giving tools to assess the quality of small area estimates. Next slide, please. So starting from this publication, the FAO will and is continuing working on data disaggregation. In particular, additional case studies will be produced on other SDG indicators such as 231 and 232 on small-scale food producer, but also on 5A1 on land ownership and secure land rights in agricultural populations, with a particular lens on women. And for this case studies, the use of small area estimation will be explored, in particular to integrate survey data with additional data sources such as census data, administrative data, but also geospatial information. Thank you very much. For me, it's all.
Thank you very much, FAO. I think the guidelines are very welcome, and I understand that FAO is a member of the Small Area Estimation Working Group. So that's great news to hear, and happy to hear that there are case studies. So I have some questions that we'll come back to when it's question time, but this is really exciting work, and I'm happy to hear about it. I understand that Karen Garcia Roja from Donny is connected now. So Karen, we will go to you for your presentation on the guide for differential and intersectorial approaches to statistical production. Over to you, Karen.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Do you listen to me?
We hear you well, Karen.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the delay, and thank you for the previous presentation. Well, I'm going to present briefly our experience with the construction of the guide for mainstreaming the differential and intersectional approaches in statistical production here in the National Statistical Office in Dane, Colombia. Next slide, please. Well, at the beginning, we realized that it was necessary to generate inclusive data in order to better comprehend the gaps between population groups. But this, of course, is a complex process. So it was identified by the National Statistical Plan from 2017 to 2022, the need to generate standards and agree on basic concepts in order to guide the national statistical system to know how to do that in common. This document present guidelines in order to guide this process throughout all the phases of the statistical process, from the collection to the dissemination of data. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Karen, I think there's a little bit of delay. I'm on the slide with how is the guide organized? If that's
Oh, I don't see it.
no.
Well, I'm going to open the presentation here. Well, but the guide is organized basically in four big chapters. The first one is a conceptual framework in which we develop basic concepts in each one of the main approaches that we impulse. First one is gender, second one is life cycle, third one is ethnic perspective, fourth one is disability perspective, and we also have an additional chapter with useful concepts in order to motivate intersectionality. For example, migration, geographical location, other perspective that we have in Colombia that we have recently included, that is the farmers of peasants that we call campesinos, that is a special identity that we recently developed. The second chapter is on a general framework chapter about laws in Colombia and the international agreements that justify and motivate the inclusion of these perspectives in data production. And with that chapter, we are willing that the public servers here in Colombia can use them to justify and to motivate their work on including these perspectives on data production. The third chapter is one about we constructed a discussion on how have we advanced in the inclusion of these perspectives in data production. So, for example, we constructed some big tables showing in which service and in which administrative records we have some basic variables that are necessary to data disaggregation in each one of the approaches. And also finally in the first chapter we have properly the guidelines with specific examples in order to become the concepts in actions. And we also have some strategic annexes. For example, we propose an inclusive language guidelines part, and also a special part with diagnosis of disaggregation of SDG indicators, in which we, for example, identify that disability disaggregation are like the less advanced. Next slide, please. Are you seeing the milestones in the guide's construction?
Yes, I see a timeline with the milestones.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so we began this process like before 2019, of course, because we have some legal needs to construct this document. But in March 2019, we decided to create a working group within DANE at the highest management level of the institution, which is the group I coordinate, the differential and intersectional approaches statistics unit. And this is like a develop of the previous group that it was just working on gender statistics. And on July of 2019, we began to develop internal row tables weekly to agree on basic concepts to be included in the guidelines. And well, at the end of the year, we constructed a draft. And during 2020, we were working in the document, and also we developed some consultations. First, like internal with experts and with academics, for example, gender experts, lawyers, demographers. And on July 2020, we organized and developed an internal consultation with technical directorates within DANE. On August, we developed a special review financed by UN Women Colombia within the the Women Count program, with an expert called Mercedes Pedrero Nieto. She has long experience in the National Statistical Office in Mexico. And well, at the end of the year, in October, November of 2020, we opened a consultation to the public, where we received a lot of comments to improve the document quality. And finally, I'm sorry, because it says November, but it was in December. In December 9th, we launched the guidelines in a joint event with the Inclusive Data Charter partnership. Next slide, please. Well, and our, as I was telling you, in the open consultation process, we received 59 specific comments from 20 participants, entities, and NGOs from the National Statistical System. We published responses to each one of the comments, and we were like qualified with 4 criteria, where we get these qualifications that you see there: incoherence, completeness, conceptual clarity, and utility potential for use, from 1 to 5. Where 5 is like the maximum positive qualification. Next slide, please. Well, this is like a brief description of the process, but here I want like to mention some of the general recommendations that we are doing, that are from our point of view simple but necessary to consider as to mainstream these approaches in the statistical process. The first one is that it's necessary to recognize that these concepts are in permanent evolution. So it is necessary to give constant training in differential and intersectional approaches to the teams in all the phases of the statistical process. We say yes to inclusive language in all the phases of the statistical process, from the design documents to the collection instruments, of course, to the dissemination products, to avoid the reproduction of stereotypes also in all the statistical process, the involvement of the group or the unit specialized in these topics in the strategic decisions in all the statistical process. Of course, these have to be mainstreamed and developed from the technical groups within the institutions, but it is necessary to consult the special unit in charge. And the idea that data disaggregation is just the basic and minimum state, but you know, to show a table with the basic or necessary disaggregation doesn't mean that you are including these perspectives well or completely. So you need to make adjustments and improvements in all the phases in order to get for that to get data disaggregation well done and to include these perspectives. Next slide, please. Well, I'm coming to the end. Well, some of the changes that we are proposing with this document is, for example, some more specific recommendations. We recommend that, for example, in all the statistical operations, we include differential approaches issues in the main objectives of the operations, because if we don't consider this in the very beginning, it is more difficult to include these approaches in the next phases. So in this for example, in this point, we have identified, and also speaking with colleagues from other national statistical offices in the region, that there is the idea that, for example, economic statistical operations don't have a lot to say about these approaches. So that's what is necessary to include, how these issues can say things in differential and intersectional approaches, for example, in gender perspective from economic surveys, but it is not that obvious at the beginning. So it is, we consider this an important recommendation. We also mentioned to consider specific methodologies to collect sensible information, for example, sensible information such as sexual orientation or gender identity, for example, self-administrative questionnaires, in order to preserve privacy, for example. Also the aspect of strengthened training concepts and protocols to guarantee human rights to collective teams. Also to consider the big potential that have the process of integration of different kind of data sources, surveys, census, and especially administrative records, because in these topics, when we create very small statistical groups that are important from the point of view of intersectionality, we have some representativeness challenges in the service, but we can say things from an administrative records and census of these small groups that we get with intersectionality. So it is important to advance in the statistical potential of use of administrative records on this topic. And we recommend a strong and strategic dissemination strategy, because it motivates the other entities of the state to do it, and it is important for the historical marginalized groups to see them in the statistical products. I think I am on time, so I'm going to stop here, and of course I am available to further questions. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you very much, Karen. Really interesting presentation, and I think it's really important to note that inclusion and diversity go beyond just data collection and need to be looked at in a holistic manner throughout the data production chain. So thank you very much for that. We're going to go to our fourth presenter now, which is Margarita Guerrero. And Margarita is going to discuss data disaggregation, the whys and hows. So Margarita, the floor is yours.
Warmest greetings to all, and thank you for finding time, whichever time of the day it is in your part of the world, to join us in what has proven so far to be very informative and interesting exchange of information. For my part, the object under discussion here began as a series of notes from the International Workshop on Data Disaggregation for the SDGs, organized by UNSD and the Asian Development Bank, who took on actually the main job of the product that we're describing as we go along in my presentation. That workshop was conducted in 2019, and it was actually followed by other regional workshops which were launched by UNSD in cooperation with the regional commissions of the UN. The current form is designed as a knowledge resource that brings together statistical standards and tools that have been and can be utilized by countries to provide disaggregated data for compiling SDG indicators. As defined, actually, it was guided strongly by the IAEG-SDGs initial work on data disaggregation. The intention is to provide a resource that can be referred to as a starting point for undertaking the statistical work required, and that is constantly updated as more and newer innovations and results are shared and discussed. The first version will soon be available on the ADB and IAEG-SDGs websites. Thank you for that. This guidebook is intended and written to be relevant and instructive for a wide range of users as an introduction to practical considerations in producing and using disaggregated statistics. Its contents are organized into 6 chapters as shown here. The statement of the problem, so to speak, in the first couple of chapters, the ultimate use of disaggregated data, better policies by zeroing in on those with the highest risks of being left behind. We heard about the issues on persons with disabilities from Dr. Lopey earlier, and we also heard how the National Statistical Office actually has started to address this, such as DANE. It talks about where and how to get data for disaggregated statistics. We in fact heard a very good presentation from our colleague Aida from FAO, zeroing in on sample surveys as data sources. Then we look at what constitutes effective data analysis and use in aid of leaving no one behind. And finally, getting to where a right strategy, such as the strategy just described by Karen, can be implemented. Each chapter, because it addresses a wide range of users, provides a light to medium technical flavor and then points to available resources that are more technical and detailed, such as the guidelines and applications that we have heard about earlier in this session. Next slide, please. Implementing the SDG indicator framework includes providing necessary statistical standards and tools in the production of indicators with recommended levels of disaggregation. This work in progress being led by the IAEG-SDGs introduced in Chapter 1 has resulted in the identification of dimensions or characteristics by which indicators are to be disaggregated, corresponding categories, and compilations of existing and ongoing work and standards. To produce the needed levels of disaggregation, as Karen actually demonstrated in the case of Colombia, SDG monitoring indicators need a strategy. National statistical systems need to prepare such a strategy, and it was very informative to listen to how Daniel talked about this and put this into a guidebook. Readers get an introduction in this particular guidebook to the Inclusive Data chapter, an initiative of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data to mobilize political commitments and meaningful actions to help countries advance disaggregated data. This includes guidance on the creation of action plans to do so. Next slide, please. The second chapter starts by delving into the policy data nexus, making the point that the absence of appropriate policies can be attributed to data gaps, but at the same time, that the lack of demand for data is also a primary challenge for producing relevant data. Earlier, we heard how important that is in the case of persons with disabilities, for example. The chapter highlights the work of the IAEG-SDGs on the minimum disaggregation set and identification of policy priorities of different vulnerable population groups defined in terms of the dimensions and categories that they've set forth. For example, for poor women and girls, but there are also other groups, children, older persons, international migrants, as well as persons with disabilities that have been identified as priority groups. The importance of heeding the human rights-based approach, I also heard this from Karen, for example, and data principles. Do no harm, nothing about us, without us in a data disaggregation strategy is emphasized as well. Next slide, please. So in chapter 2, we get to look at 3 policy data integration tools that facilitate the linking of policy with a multi-stakeholder approach for strengthening commitments. EPIC, or Every Policy is Connected, is a tool developed by SCAP for reviewing the data needs for monitoring national policies. The tool is based on a framework for structured, participatory, and principle-based dialogue between policy and data stakeholders. ADAPT, or Advanced Planning Data Tool, developed by Paris 21, is a complementary policy data tool which examines the cost of development of specific SDG indicators. Our latest innovation is the inclusion of a gender module that allows costing, for example, of gender-related indicators. StatAct, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it is a tool developed by UNITAR and UNSD, enables countries to address measurement gaps by resolving problems tactically. That's where TACT comes from, through the design of a short-term action plan. Next slide, please. The third chapter goes through the traditional and newer data sources for disaggregated statistics, providing overviews of strengths, potentials, and limitations. A hybrid census, for example, to generate spatially disaggregated population estimates developed by UNFPA. FAO, we just heard from our colleague Aida, gives in-depth and new looks to sample surveys. And a bit on administrative reporting systems, CRVS, but not very much. Sorry on this for this particular version. Lots of small area estimation methods applications, and rightfully so, a new work stream of emphasis for the IAEGs, highlighting the work of ADB, as well as other countries on poverty, unemployment rates, health, and nutrition. It gives a peek into the growing inventory of big data and geospatial data examples, and the data integration methods. Again, you heard it's another ongoing work stream of the IAEG that enhance and expand the use of otherwise disparate data sources by linking them together. The chapter opens doorways to 7 technical manuals, and we will have to include the three others that we've heard about this morning. Readers will hear about example from Bangladesh that, for example, focus on inequality and poverty indicators using geospatial data and a health survey. And then from Sri Lanka that focused on women's empowerment indicators using a labor force survey and a household income and expenditure survey. Next slide, please. Chapter 4 gives examples of frameworks and tools for disaggregation analysis and illustrates its use in looking at poverty and gender and intersectionality. It also introduces software and equity assessments. Readers get to learn of a framework and training course for multi-level analysis developed by UN Women, and of WHO's Health Equity Assessment Toolkit, HEAT and HEAT Plus, where measures of inequality applied to health-related indicators can be generated. Next slide, please. The chapter also demonstrates the importance of data visualization and telling stories to understand better the inequality numbers. For example, this chart illustrates the concept of gender and intersecting inequalities. Aggregated statistics, national average, 40.2% of women aged 18 to 49 in Pakistan were married or in a union before 18 years old, versus this aggregated statistics using location and poverty quintiles, revealing that the gap in corresponding percentages between the poorest in the rural areas and the richest in urban areas can be large, as much as 35%. Averages don't give that picture. Next slide, please. In chapter 5, readers can learn from a country experience on how effective data dissemination and communication of SDG statistics result in actual policy uses. Again, something that's been emphasized by our readers. It also gives examples, again, of effective visualizations and dashboards on SDG statistics for ease of conveying patterns of inequalities and inequities. So an illustration of what is introduced, the spider plot, again emphasizing that inequalities by displaying several indicators: reproductive health, education, decision-making, and access to finance in the form of two-dimensional chart with disaggregated data. Data portals and dashboards of 12 countries. You're given links to that in this guidebook. which were developed under the UNSD UK project on SDG monitoring, can provide ideas to those who are building one or aiming to improve existing ones. Since the pages corresponding to that were put together, there have been more actually portals that have been developed. And then again, like I said earlier, future versions of this slide document will, the plan is highlight these things. Next slide, please. The final chapter looks at key issues on why required disaggregated data are often not available and provides information on knowledge products and ongoing capacity development initiatives that may help readers address these issues. Apart from the technical challenges illustrated in previous chapters, data governance issues relating to the human rights principle of do no harm. We talked about the human rights-based approach. We also heard this again emphasized by our the discussion on persons with disabilities and the discussion on of Karen on the need to look at these principles because the important thing is data disaggregation should not, in fact, create or reinforce discrimination, bias, or stereotypes against population groups. And definitely, this information should not be used in that manner. Next slide, please. Official statistics are expected to keep up with the growing demands of data users, and to this end, attempts to modernize statistical production have been increasingly undertaken by NSOs since they recognize the potential of novel data processing techniques and new data sources. This requires new skills that reach beyond the traditional set of statistical competencies. Readers will learn about the proposed framework for big data-related competencies, as briefly shown here, and the new approach, CD 4.0, to capacity, to a more comprehensive capacity development covering individual, institutional, and system-wide capacity development needs. And not to forget to mention citizen-generated data, a source that is increasingly being explored by NSSS. What kind of competencies are needed to do this? The guidebook actually provides examples of initiatives in the Philippines and Maldives that were supported by Paris 21 in exploring how this can actually be utilized, first put together and then utilized in the process for doing so. Next slide, please. This guidebook has two versions, a printed publication, which is in the, almost ready to go, and an online version that will be a living document, continually updated to keep up with the growing work we've heard about and experiences that generate useful knowledge for producing and analyzing data for LNOP. There is, for example, a forthcoming IAEG compilation of tools and guidance of existing materials for data disaggregation you heard about earlier, and just launched earlier this month by UN Women and the Intersecretariat Working Group for Household Surveys, a toolkit to better utilize existing household surveys to generate disaggregated gender statistics. And with the other examples you've heard earlier, we know that this story on data disaggregation and how to do it doesn't end here. But, well, this presentation does end here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margarita. A great presentation and a nice way to end the presentations for this session with a compilation of all the tools. And certainly, I think bringing in policymakers to talk about the importance of inclusive data and data disaggregation is important because it is often policymakers that are funding the survey. So I think that's an important point to have brought them in. So we're now going to go to our question and answer session. I have looked in the chat and I do not see any in the chat. UNSD, if I'm missing something, please let me know. But in the meantime, I do have a question for our presenters. They've got these tools and these guidelines, but what is the actual technical assistance that they're providing for national statistics offices. So more directly, are you actually working with national statistics offices with them to help get their data, to show them concretely how to do something such as small area estimation or other model-based approaches to data disaggregation? And so that's for each of our presenters, most specifically for, I think FAO, that would be a good one for you. And then colleagues from DONE, is DONE, the National Statistics Office, helping other data producing departments to do that. So I will ask that question to our presenters. And I think maybe we'll start with FAO, if you'd like to first field this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara, for this question. So yes, the idea was to have first this guideline as a first, let's say, methodological tool, to then start to provide technical assistance to partner countries on how to implement the methods that are proposed inside these guidelines, and also the additional case studies we are working on using small area estimation. So let's say that this publication was the first step with the idea of now starting to work with countries to provide technical assistance on data disaggregation. Let's say that so far, most technical assistance has been provided, like, in order to actually generate this data, and also start collecting data that can be used to compute SDGs indicators. So from now on, let's say all the methodologies that have been produced will be used to also develop technical assistance programs.
Thank you very much. I think that provides some good specificity. Karen, can I ask you the same question? Karen, you are on mute. Paul, can you unmute Karen for us?
Thank you. I think I'm done. Do you listen to me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you. I just changed my device. I'm sorry. Yes, in fact, we are planning some, and in fact applying some as strategies this year to advance in the implementation of the guide. We understand that this is a long-term process that possibly will not be really close at any point. This needs a constant evolution, but we want to motivate specific actions from the other institutions of the national statistical system to implement these guidelines. So with the launch of the document, we generated an official document, a resolution, in which we say that we are going to guide and to give technical assistance to the other institutions of the national statistical system to negotiate or create some specific actions that are going to be a part of a plan, of an implementation plan in a short term of 2 years, to December of 2022. So in order to motivate and guide these actions, we are structuring a series of workshops by themes. For example, the first one is health and demographic statistics. The second one is government, justice, and security statistics. and we are inviting institutions that are related with these topics, and socializing the contents of the guidelines, and giving examples of how would it be to apply some concrete actions, for example, in improving variables or generating additional products to disseminate these kind of statistics. And we are also working in a virtual course to offer this course to public workers in the second part of this year, in the second semester, in order also to share more pedagogically these contents of the guidelines, because the document is a 200 pages document, is a heavy document, including all the perspective from the approaches. So we think this virtual course is going, that is a course that we are planning from 40 to 50 hours with a special certificate, will motivate our colleagues from other institutions to keep working on these topics.
Kara, may I add something? Yeah, because I made this presentation on behalf of the Asian Development Bank and UNSD, who were two of the organizations that drove very strongly the putting together of this guidebook. Actually, almost all of the examples and illustrations in the guidebook came from agencies, international agencies who have worked with countries in capacity development initiatives, and these are the results of that work. And so that's the nice thing about this guidebook. If you want to find out who can be approached or what capacity development initiatives exist, then you have information about that. For instance, for ADB in particular, the work on small area estimation and data integration, they have been working in this area for quite a while, and the examples there were outputs of the capacity development initiatives they've worked with. They've initiated and partnered with in countries. Likewise, examples from Paris 21's capacity development initiatives for UNSD. And so if you're talking about capacity development initiatives, what perhaps one set of information that this guidebook provides is you know which organization you can actually approach, because they are doing things in this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Lopey, before we have a couple of questions in the chat, but before we go to those, I did want to ask you a bit about the disability data advocacy toolkit that you talked about and launched. My question is perhaps a bit more country specific, but one of the things, you know, in part we use the Washington Group set of questions for disability, but also some of our policymakers like the definition, social definition of disability, which doesn't match and map correctly or 100% to the Washington set of questions. But nonetheless, for some of our surveys gives us some disability related disaggregation capacities. So I'm just wondering, how do you square that with the Washington set of questions, which is a medically based set of questions to determine disability versus the social construct of disability, and do you address that at all in your toolkit? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this is an excellent question actually, and I'm glad that you are emphasizing the social aspect of disability definition that we are very strongly advocating for or promoting on many levels, including data advocacy. We may agree on the fact that the Washington Group data tools are more emphasizing the medical aspect of disability. However, we've been part of the Washington Group. We've been supporting the Washington Group, especially that the Washington Group has the expertise to, at least on the technical aspect of data collection, data disaggregation, and analysis. And we have done lots of training, especially here in New York, with targeting organizations of persons with disabilities and civil society organizations interested in disability data on how to gather data and understand data on disability in partnership with the Washington Group. However, the toolkit is definitely all for the social model on disability, and this is what we are very much interested and eager to make sure that National Statistics Office are are aware of. This is why we are emphasizing learning disability awareness. This is why we are emphasizing community-driven data on disability, and this is why we are addressing disability data as a matter that is really feeding into the into filling the gap that we are still witnessing on the level of national policies, especially that nowadays the original idea that we are working on disability data, in addition to the results of the disability data advocacy working group that we launched in 2019, is that the CRPD emphasizes the social model on disability, and the CRPD really encourages governments to collect data, pursuing disability data, to collect disability data, pursuing the social model. Having that said, we cannot completely disregard or the medical aspect of disability, because there are services that are rather pertaining and targeting the medical needs of persons with disabilities. And however, what we are more concerned about if we want to if National Statistics Office or international organizations would focus on the medical model, is that they are going to leave major aspects on disability behind, especially when it comes to the role of disability data in influencing policies on employment or on education, on accessibility, on infrastructure, urban development, e-governance, and so on and so forth. Especially that now we are seeing more interested in disability. We are seeing more interest in disability. We are seeing that, or we came to the point that we are all seeing that the world is starting to realize how disability is relevant to different aspects. So the toolkit definitely emphasizes the social model and the universal aspect of disability inclusion in international development. So this is what how we are approaching it. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you very much. You did indeed. Okay, so I'm going to go to the chat now. And so one of the comments that we've received from the chat is, are you planning to provide more focused reports on different populations? I am especially interested in early childhood. The information about this group is particularly poor. So for our colleagues that have maybe we'll go to Karen and maybe Margarita. Do you have anything specific on children in your tools and guides? Karen, if you would like to respond first.
Thank you. Well, we have the concepts about childhood and the normative aspects about the rights of childhood and the importance of considering this approach in our section of life cycle. But well, our document makes an effort to include different approaches in the same guidelines. For example, we when we were reviewing all the literature and the international toolkits, We all, of course, found a lot of gender statistics toolkits, and by the other hand, childhood toolkits, and by the other hand, disability toolkits. But it was a challenge to include all the topics in the same document. So we all, of course, mentioned this topic, and mentioned, for example, the age intervals that we consider from our legal point of view, the first childhood period, and the childhood and the adolescence ages, but like in preserving a balance with the other topics. It's not like a special part.
Thank you very much. Margarita, if you are still there, is there anything in the work that you've put together that is specifically references children?
Unfortunately, not specifically children, except for the policy priorities that were initially identified by the IAEG-SDGs. It was mentioned there. If you're targeting early childhood, for instance, I think for right now there are no case studies or material that is in this guidebook. But like we mentioned, in fact, the concept here is as long as there's work that's being done out there, then let's put them all together, and that would be the approach that I think not just for this practical guidebook, but for most of the toolkits that we've been listening to should take. And in fact, my right now the guide toolkits that were described earlier, I was not aware of that when we were putting these things together. And so my mind was racing right now, and said, so how do we keep in touch with each other so that there will be this, we make sure that all of these knowledge products are out there for people who need them. And I guess the IAEG's work on compilations of methods and guidelines, that would be like the global universal toolkit for all.
Thank you very much. And I see we have a comment from Jennifer Maddens to everyone regarding the Washington group questions. And she notes they focus on functioning, not on medical aspects of disability, which asks about medical conditions. When data are disaggregated by disability status using the Washington group questions, the social model is incorporated through the analysis. Any differential are due to the environmental aspects that are inherent in the social aspects of disability. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for that. We also have another question. Let's see. Don't you think that the indicators related with the SDG 4.2 are incomplete? It is needed to develop more data and information about this fundamental and invisible group. So 4.2, you'll have to forgive me. I know it's education, but off the top of my head, I don't know the target 4.2. I haven't memorized all of them yet. But 4.2, Heather or Paul?
It's early childhood development. It's
Okay.
Currently we have the information. The indicator is for age 24 to 59, and we're missing the 0 to 2 years old. I think, yeah, 36 to 59. So we're missing the 0 to 2 years old part, and it's under development.
Right. I think again, you know, it is a balancing act for countries and national statistics offices to ensure that data collected meet policy needs for the country, as well as can best report to the SDGs. So certainly, yes, there is a gap on those very early years, 0 to 2 years old. And I see Heather's noted that there's going to be specific links to tools and resources mentioned today in the meeting, and I do not see any other questions. If there are no other questions, then I suggest that we turn back to the next session because we're running a little bit late. and we want to make sure that we have time for the next set of presentations. So I'm going to turn it over to our co-chair, Dr. Albina Chua. And Dr. Albina, I will let you take over from here. So thank you very much to our first set of presenters, and I wish them all a great day. I hope that they can stay to hear this next session, because I think it's going to be just as interesting as this session was. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Karen, colleagues. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Now we are in number 2, and we focus on reports and methodological development on SDGs monitoring initiatives. We will have 3 presentations and statement, which will follow by questions and answers. As usual, please send questions in the chat. And let me introduce Mrs. Petra from UNIDO. She will report on SDG 9 industry track. Over to you, UNIDO. You have 10 minutes to present this.
Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me and see me. My name is Petra Kinslova, and I work for UNIDO Statistics Division. And I'm going to talk today about our new tool, which is called SDG 9 Industry Tracker. This is a tool we developed last year at our Department of Research, Statistics and Policy Advice. So it's a joint effort of all these important parts important for SDG monitoring. First, I'm going to just go through a couple of slides to introduce the methodology and tools we are using. And then I will switch to a live demonstration of the platform. So UNIDO is a custodian agency of 6 SDG 9 indicators, which are related to industrial development. And they cover all 3 dimensions of sustainable development. So we have advancing economic competitiveness, where we have indicators related to importance of manufacturing and its technological development and innovation. Then creating a shared prosperity, where we can see how many jobs are created through manufacturing, and also how much are small industrial enterprises included in this process. And the last one is safeguarding the environment, represented by CO2 emissions, and connected to industrial energy efficiency and environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. So our SDG 9 industry tracker has 2 parts. The first one is called SDG 9 Industry Index, which is a composite measure benchmarking countries' performance towards these industry-related targets. And to calculate this index, we are using only 5 of these indicators, because the coverage of small-scale industrial enterprises is too low to be included in the index so far. But then this index represents one single measure, which could help countries to identify the dimensions where they are either very strong or they lag behind other countries. As you can see here on the left side, there is a simple radar chart how this index and its dimensions could be presented. But what I really want to mention here again is it's a composite measure, so it's just a communication tool for us. And we should be very careful by interpreting the results coming out of this index. Next slide, please. So we have 5 indicators which are needed to construct the index. So we are still struggling here with some data gaps. You could see here that the biggest problem is in the region of Africa, where we really lack quite a number of countries. The index was compiled over the time period 2000 up to 2017, and we have now included 128 economies. But you can see that in Africa, there are only 24 countries included out of 54, and only 8 African LDCs have sufficient data to be covered by this index. So this is also a tool which is helping us to show countries that if they advance in their capacity building, they could be later on included in the index. Next slide, please. And the second part of the SDG 9 industry tracker is a progress and outlook indicator. For example, here we have the target 9.2, which is clearly stating to significantly raise industry's share of employment and GDP. But there is also specifically stated to double its share in least developed countries. So this is a way which could be measured. And that's why we decided to also include this progress and outlook indicators to be part of the platform. The methodology was developed based on the methodology developed by UNESCAP, so who were very nice and shared with us all the methodological materials. And then we adjusted this methodology for our needs to apply them on the SDG 9 industry indicators. So we have 2 measures. One is called progress, which is trying to answer the question how much progress has been made since 2000. And this is evaluated based on the existing data series until the most recent available data point. And we usually assess the progress with respect to the SDG region as they are specified by the global SDG report published every year. And in case of LDCs, the target is double the share as indicated in the target 9.2. And then we have 4 different measures corresponding to either negative, insignificant, fair, or substantial progress made by countries. And the second measure is, we call it outlook, answering the question, how likely will the targets be achieved by 2030? And there we are forecasting a country data series until 2030, and we are assessing like what is the chance that the target will be met when we are considering the past development. And there we have 3 different measures, either indicating to reverse the trend on the indicator, or accelerate progress, or that the country is on track to achieve the SDG target. Next slide, please. And this UNIDO SDG 9 industry tracker was included in our industrial analytics platform, which was developed a few years ago. And this is a platform which focuses on providing and communicating data on industrial development, and also putting in the way of how they could be easily communicated to a broader public. So we have 2 parts of this platform. One is Data Explorer, which shows in a nice way all the data regarding manufacturing, production, trade, and also inclusion of in global value chains. And then we have also articles, which are also data-driven, and they are trying to explain all the most recent developments in industrial development, or also like addressing the emerging issues like now is the impact of COVID-19 on industry. So from now, I will go to the live demonstration of the platform. If I can get right to share, please. So I hope you can see it. So this is the IAP platform. You could see here that you can go to the Data Explorer, different country profiles, or the articles. But the center of the platform is so far our SDG 9 industry tracker, where you could select any country of interest, compare the country with another comparator, and also compare the performance with the region, or also with other political groupings. There is this selection tab which you can decide. And then we have these two parts on SDG 9 index, where you can see which dimensions are actually dominating or which are weak. Like in this case, we would probably address the value added per capita. On the right side, you can see the ranking, which is assigned to the SDG 9 index, and you can also see the change in the rank over the time. And when you scroll down, then we have this particular data series and the development over the time. You could also compare the country over time or with other comparators like the region or other countries, or also we have the stage of development group, which is also designed by UNIDO. And you can also see here these two measures, like the progress made over the last over the recent years, starting from 2000, or also the outlook measure, which indicates what the country should do if they want to achieve the target. This is really specifically designed to follow the original formulation of the SDG targets. What is also a part of this platform is that when we click on a country which is not covered by the index, we see that there are no data, but we could also see like which indicator is missing to enable the calculation of the index, which is here the CO2 efficiency. So this also shows countries where the lack of data is coming from. And then when we continue when we are interested about knowing more about the situation in a country, then we can explore the manufacturing sector in more detail. So we can see more disaggregated data by sectors. And here we have also indicators related to trade or technology intensity, and also to see different sectors if the data are available. You can also compare how the structure of the sectors is changing over time. And if more detailed information is still needed, then we can analyze it in more detail. Again, if the data are available, or if you are interested in more detailed information. Then we have also like a country profiles here, which is a summary of all the important information coming from not only the SDG 9 tracker, but also from other indicators used to provide a simple summary of the industrial situation in the country. And then we have our articles, which are developed not only internally at UNIDO, but also with researchers from all around the world, addressing the most emerging issues, and also trying to answer like the most the recently asked questions. Also, like what is, for example, what is the fourth industrial revolution? What is meant by that? Or what are global value chains, and other issues? And what I still want to show you is that all these articles are again data driven, so they are supported by interactive, okay, this one doesn't work now, but by also interactive graphics referring to the data which are being used. So I would stop sharing here. Thank you very much. This is all from my side now.
Thank you so much for this very important platform that will really help us to monitor SDG 9. So I now welcome Madame Theodora from European Mission. She will present to us on the development of a methodological manual to define cities, town, and rural areas. Back to you, Madame Theodora. You have 10 minutes exactly.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to speak here in this event. So my name is Theodora Brandmüller, advocate at Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Union. And today I would like to briefly present you our latest manual on applying the degree of urbanization, which has been released recently. So why we wanted to have such a manual? At the level of international official statistics and international statistical standards, there is no harmonized and universally implemented definition of urban and rural areas. The Sustainable Development Goals include many indicators that should be measured exactly at these places, in rural areas and in urban areas or in cities. And many of these indicators are very sensitive to where we draw the boundary. So here on the slide, I listed a few examples. For example, access to safe drinking water or access to electricity is very sensitive to the rural definition used. On the other hand, population that have convenient access to public transport or land consumption over population growth are very sensitive where how we define the city. And without a harmonized global definition for comparison of indicators for these cities, urban and rural areas, it is very difficult to interpret the results because the differences in the values might be biased by the differences in the definitions. So for international comparisons, we need harmonized definitions. So what was our solution? Next slide, please. One back. So the solution was to apply the global people-based definition of for urban areas, rural areas, and cities. And this proposed solution was developed as a joint effort of several international organizations. The work started actually at the UN Habitat Conference in 2016 with the European Commission, OECD, the World Bank, the FAO, the ILO, and the UN Habitat has also joined this work. So this work is will also improve the measuring of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it will also support the new urban agenda and also the global strategy to improve agricultural and rural statistics. So what we propose, the method, is the so-called degree of urbanization and its two extensions. Next slide, please. So in the degree of urbanization is implemented in a two-step approach. The whole basis of the definition is that we start from the 1 kilometer square population grid, and each grid cell has the same shape and size, and it will help us to avoid distortions caused by units of different shapes and sizes. So as a first step, this you can see on the left side, the grid cells are clustered and classified as either urban centers, these are in red, or urban clusters, these are in yellow, or as rural grid cells, these are in green, depending on the population, the total population, and the density of the population. And then in a second step, these clusters are overlaid with local units, which can be administrative, for example, municipalities, or statistical, for example, such as census enumeration areas. And then the degree of urbanization classifies these local units as cities, towns, and semi-dense areas. These are the yellow areas on the right-hand side, or rural areas. These are the green areas on the right-hand side. And here you can see the example from South Africa, the area close to Durban. So this is the method. And why is it so? What are the main advantages of this method? Next slide, please. So the main advantage is that it starts from a population grid, which, as I mentioned, it reduces the bias generated by the different shapes and sizes of the spatial units. See, for example, here on the picture, on the slide, here on the left side, there is only one settlement identified when we use the population density at the administrative unit level, whereas the population grid on the right side reveals that there are actually two settlements, they are circled in red, when we use the population grid. So starting from the population grid, it will reduce the bias, which is generated usually by the different shapes and sizes of administrative units, which is natural. Then as a second advantage, also that it measures population clusters directly instead by proxies, for example, through building clusters. Also, it uses the same population size and density thresholds across the globe. We had some sensitivity analysis around this threshold, and these thresholds seem to be picturing well most countries, the cities, urban areas, and rural areas. Next slide, please. So in addition, what we can also see is that some international reports present data broken down for urban and rural, so in these two categories. Many countries, however, use an approach with multiple classes to better capture the urban-rural continuum, which is then, of course, not well reflected if we only use the two classes for reporting. And in the degree of urbanization, by creating a separate class in the middle, the degree of it enhances the possibility for harmonization, and the comparability is better, and it also better reflects reality. Here on the right side, we put some satellite images from the different areas. So what is a city, what is a town, what is a village, using the degree of urbanization classification. Then one more advantage, that the degree of urbanization defines areas to monitor access to services and not areas defined by access to services, which was used many times in national definitions, that certain service is related to the definition of a city, and then of course it will not be maintained if we use this for monitoring as well. And then as last, this proposes a cost-effective approach. So why do I say that? More and more countries are conducting geocoded censuses or have a georeference population registers. Based on these, creating a population grid can be done with some, but not a big amount of additional cost. And if the exact location of the population is not available, a population disaggregated grid can be created by combining the population of the census enumeration areas with high resolution land use or land cover data produced using remote sensing. Several organizations, including the European Commission, offer a free of charge global layer, including the global human settlement layer, which can help in this case. So what can we learn from using this methodology? Next slide, please. So here I'm just showing you one example, how we can see the results using the degree of urbanization. So the figure shows three values for each country. The blue dots represent the cities, the yellow dots the towns and semi-dense areas, while the green dots represent rural areas. And as you can see, in most countries included in the Demographic and Health Survey, a higher share of households in cities had access to safely managed drinking water than the share recorded for the households in towns and semi-dense areas, the yellow dot. And then in turn, these areas had a higher share than for the households in rural areas. So on average, across these countries, which are shown on the graph, 56% of the households in cities had access to safely managed drinking water in cities, compared to 26% of the households in rural areas. So you can see that showing the figure broken down by rural areas, towns and semi-dense areas and cities, you get a much more detailed picture of the situation. And then next slide, please. As I mentioned in the very beginning, the degree of urbanization has two extensions. One is the functional urban area. You can read more about it in the publication. And the other I wanted to mention here just very briefly is the so-called degree of urbanization level 2. So the three classes that we use in the level 1 of the degree of urbanization, it already provides an important first step to assess the urban-rural continuum. But then going deeper, to break down even to smaller categories, the middle category, the towns and semi-dense areas and the rural areas, it provides us even more possibilities. So here, for example, I am showing you the example, the average distance in kilometer to the nearest healthcare facility by degree of urbanization, level 2. And you can see that here we have subdivided the categories into smaller ones to capture the full settlement hierarchy. So in simpler terms, we are not only showing the cities, but also we show the towns and the villages and the remote, so the semi-dense areas. So this was just a very short example due to the shortness of time to show you how the degree of urbanization can be used. Next slide, please. And I would like to emphasize that this methodology has been endorsed by the UN Statistical Commission in its 31st session. And we were mandated by this meeting, the UN Statistical Commission, to provide this methodological guideline on how to apply the degree of urbanization. And if you are interested in this, next slide, please, then you can find it on the link, and also the different tools that are available free of charge. And I hope that managed to trigger your interest in this new method. Thank you very much.
Much, Madam Theodora, and hoping Tanzania is very much interested on this, as we will be doing our population and housing census next year. I hope this is really very important to us and the other parts of the world. May I now welcome Camilo. She will present to us the working group on measurement of development support. Over to you, Mr. Camilo from Colombia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to all the participants who are joining us today. Today, we are glad to present to you the progress report of the working group on measurement of development support. Please, the next slide. So initially, I would like to provide some general context of this working group. This working group was established on May 2020, and we held our first meeting on the 27th of May. Now we've come a long way, and we held our 10th meeting just a few days ago on the 23rd of March, and we have been holding monthly meetings. Regardless of this working group, we have been tasked to further develop and refine the measurement of development support in line with the 2030 under target 17.3, specifically seeks to mobilize additional financial resources for developing countries from multiple sources. It is also important to note that this would be like the fourth report that we provide to the IAEG-SDGs. The first one was provided during the last open meeting on October 2020, the second during the 11th meeting of the IAEG, and the third one via written comments for the elaboration of the report of the IAEG to the 52nd United Nations Statistical Commission. Next slide. So now I just wanted to quickly show the membership of this working group to note three specific things. Firstly, that the United Nations Statistics Division is the secretariat and has the support of our UNCTAD and the OECD, which also provides some support in that sense. And I just wanted to to point that both the Netherlands and the Republic of Korea have joined this working group as observers since the last time we had the opportunity to report IAEG-SDGs. Next slide, please. So I believe that there's something not quite showing well on the presentation. Maybe it's the colors, but yeah. Sorry. Thank you very much. This on the sixth meeting that was held on the 20th of November, we had the chance to approve the TORs for the establishment of a subgroup on South-South cooperation, discussing the alignment of our work with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and also looking at how can the work of the working group align with the international, the INFFs. Moreover, on the 16th of December, we held at our seventh meeting, in which we had the opportunity to have a discussion regarding the IPGs, which was allowed thanks to a paper prepared by UNSD and further inputs by the OECD. Moreover, the subgroup on South-South cooperation provided an update in which, in the first meeting, India was elected as the chair of this group. During our eighth meeting, we had the opportunity to discuss background note prepared by the Secretariat, and the co-chairs that I forgot to mention are Colombia and Norway, which was towards a core proposal. In this section, we managed to gather some initial responses from the members participating. And one of the preliminary conclusions of this was the importance of aligning the different flows with sustainable development. And we also had the opportunity to receive some insight regarding the long-lasting challenges regarding the measurement of South cooperation. Moreover, during the ninth meeting that was held the 18th, 19th, and 23rd of February of 2021, we continue our discussion regarding the core proposal of this group, and we focused also on the debate on how to operationalize the concept of sustainable development. And just a few days ago, we had the opportunity to hold our 10th meeting, in which we focused on some specific flows that should be considered, and some discussions regarding how to address the inclusion of private and concessional flows under the measurement, how to take into account the resources that are mobilized in developing countries, and also those that arrive in developing countries. Finally, on our 10th, we had a discussion regarding FDI, data availability, and that's our progress till the moment in terms of timeline. So next slide, please. Yeah, so now go a little bit deeper on the matters that are addressed on this working group. I'd like to separate the discussion on two moments. Firstly, regarding our regular meetings, it is important to note that a consensus has started to emerge regarding the adoption of a total external finance approach towards available resources, instead of just focusing on this additional component. This was the core idea that was included in the towards a core proposal background note. It is also to note that some consensus has been reached regarding the operationalization of sustainable development, under which the group has agreed on adopting some overarching criteria, but also taking into consideration some specific exclusions for the flows. Also, as a result of our discussion of just a few days ago, it was pointed it is important to differentiate between concessional flows and non-concessional flows, and present it in a way that and do it as a bulk. Moreover, the group has agreed to advance in a case-by-case analysis on how to resources that are mobilized in developing countries, as well as those which those flows that do not specifically arrive to the developing countries, such as scholarships. Moreover, it was agreed to have an incremental approach regarding the inclusion of the FDI. And for our next meeting, we will discuss aspects regarding data availability following the BOP statistics. As for the research agenda, we had established 3 specific items to take a deeper look. The first one is the South-South cooperation, which, as I told before, has become a subgroup, and in which, with India as chair and UNCTAD providing substantial support, I want to highlight also the engagement from countries, particularly Brazil and Mexico, which have provided some great inputs for the discussions. And also I want to highlight also the group's willingness to include other stakeholders in the discussion, such as the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and the South Center. Regarding the IPGs, while the group recognized in several occasions the contributions that IPGs have to sustainable development, we faced 2 specific challenges, one from a more political nature, under which there is a lack of a globally accepted operational agreed definition of IPGs, and also an inherent definition between what the public aspect of the international public goods and the target of this working group, which seeks only to measure support for developing countries. And finally, on the third agenda item of the research agenda, which is mobilized private finance, we countries to provide some specific examples in the wiki page to inform the discussions. Next slide, please. At this point, I wanted to share with you some a small concern that we might have regarding the attendance of countries in this working group. As you can see from the row in the low level, we have benefited from a great participation during all our meetings, having more than 43 participants in each one of them. But what can be worrisome is the participation of countries during the meeting, as we are seeing a lack of engagement of developing countries, and we think that their participation is crucial in this space to have inclusive discussions. Next slide. And finally, I wanted to just end up with firstly, one overarching challenge that the group has faced and is dealing with long-standing discussions in which the emergence of agreements is hinged by international consensus on matters such as the IPGs or how to measure South cooperation. Secondly, it is also important to note that the membership of the group is extended both to national statistical offices and development cooperation agencies, which in times has helped to provide great inputs for the discussions, but has affected the timeliness of the responses to the group's activity. For the forthcoming stages, the group will be focused on concept building on existing frameworks. So that's the update that I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Camilo, for your presentation and updating us on what is going on. And I'm so much sorry about the engagement for the developing countries not to attend this meeting as it is supposed to be done. So I hope this will be taken on board. So may I now welcome Mr. Bain. Mr. Bain is going to give us a statement on the business and industry working group to the IAEG-SDGs from the Statistical Commission, describing contribution that can be made by this sector. Over to you, Mr. Bain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Business and Industry Major Group would like to thank the UN Statistical Commission, the Interagency and Expert Group for the SDGs and the US Statistics Division for their inclusive approach and participation of the private sector, civil society and other stakeholders in their work. The private sector is invested in helping develop indicators to measure progress towards meeting the SDGs, both through involvement with the IAEG-SDGs and through working with UN and other agencies in the detailed work that they undertake. The private sector can make a major contribution to ensuring SDG indicators truly measure the global goals and targets by providing input in developing methodology and through sharing its extensive data collection and analysis skills. For example, in 2017, a combined methodological approach was used for developing the global estimates of modern slavery, which underpin SDG 8.7, by a consortium including the Walk Free Foundation, the ILO, and the IOM. This drew on a survey program implemented by Gallup in 54 countries, the most extensive survey program on modern slavery ever undertaken, and which forms the central component of the global estimates of modern slavery. The IAEG-SDGs has shown how international organizations, member states, agencies, the private sector, civil society, and academia can work together in such an important task. Stakeholders have much to offer, and we hope that the spirit of collaboration can continue to grow and flourish throughout the UN system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bain, for this. Let me now open floor for the discussions that will last for 10 minutes, and I will request UNSD to help us to read out from the presenters. So presenters, get ready to respond to these some of the comments from the floor. Over to UNSD from the chat.
You're muted, Heather.
Hi, this is Heather with UNSD and muted. One of the first questions that came in was to Theodora regarding asking if there are global grid layers for at least level 1, given the global gridded available population estimates. And she has answered that in chat, but I just wanted to give her an opportunity to add any information she'd like regarding this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, it's available based on the global human settlement layer, which have been calculated by our colleagues in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. So I provided the link in the chat, and more details about all these resources are available in the manual, which my colleague kindly included in the chat, the link where you can download the publication. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just would like to also mention and reiterate that on the meeting website, we will include the direct links to a lot of the tools and resources that have been mentioned during the sessions. So you'll be able to also find them there in case you're watching on YouTube and you can't see the chat for the links. The next set of questions I have are for Camilo, and I'll just start with the first two and then proceed from there. So the first one was, is the note towards a core proposal in the public domain? And then also, have you focused on issues to do with illicit financial flows, particularly new methods to measure them? And I'll stop there and let you answer those, and there's one more afterward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. As for the first question, the note is not on public domain. It has been posted on the wiki page in which members engage and share their in between meetings. As for the second question, I believe it's on the I've seen it on the chat. It's not discussed matters regarding international illicit financial flows, I believe. Yeah, we have not discussed it. And for the domestic resources, we have not approached this, as this is covered on target 17.1 and the group focuses exclusively on 17.3. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last question that came through, has there been consideration of including NGOs as observers in the working group? They've mentioned that they coordinate civil society FFD groups and the issue is important to them. And also another NGO mentioned that the issue is very important to their work as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this moment, we have not discussed the inclusion of NGOs. What is important to mention is the openness of including some external experts to the discussions, as this is the case for the South Cooperation subgroup. But we take note of this. Thank you.
Albina, I do not see any additional questions for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. I have one question to UNIDO, Madam Petra. I'm wondering the issue of capacity building under this platform. To me, it seems like this platform is so important. And is there any plan also of disseminating this platform widely? The same apply to European, to Madam Theodora also. The issue of also a wider dissemination of this measurement of degree of urbanizations. To me, this is very, very good. I saw those dots. How could somebody translate those dots? The blue dots, these kind of things. Do you have this plan ahead? And especially for developing countries. And also, I don't know, because for us, urban, rural, it's really a big issue around the national statistical offices in terms of measurements. Over to you, Madam Unido, and if I can get something from Madam Theodora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, the platform itself was developed as a tool for a better data dissemination and communication of these issues with member states. And not only with member states, but with any type of user who would be interested in this data. And as I showed, there is also like a no data indication. And this is a way of communicating the data gaps with countries, because we want to invite countries to see that if they produce more data and if there is a better capacity, then they could be also included in this tracker and also in analyzing the data and other policy issues. Actually, this another point is that in November 2020, there was an Africa Industrialization Summit, which took place actually also virtually. And for that summit, we developed like 4 country briefs for 4 African countries, where we were really using this data from the platform and discussing this data with national experts and researchers. And then we produced like 6 pages of the situation of industry in the country by using this data. So this could be also a way how the tool could be disseminated and to help countries to provide and produce more data. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Madam Theodora from European
Yes.
Commission.
Thank you very much. Yes, we also found that these differences drawing more attention to these issues are very important. So I fully agree with you that raising more awareness is very important. And this is why all the other organizations we have been working together, we are very happy and grateful for this opportunity that we could present here at this forum. And I hope that the manual that we recently published will be also used by the National Statistical Institutes and also policymakers at national and regional levels, so they can see how they can put these classification into the practice and get more information on these very crucial indicators by the appropriate breakdowns that would help them to address those issues. So I'm hopeful, and everybody who can spread the word, please do so.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Madam Theodora, and all the best. We hope to see the dissemination widely. So members, participants, we are now approaching to the general questions and answers. And of course, as usual, for each open meeting, there's an opportunity to ask questions during the registration. So our UNSD colleagues will read out some of the questions we have received. And the topics include data disaggregation, data collection and data gaps, SDGs related, and COVID-19 related. So over to you, UNSD's colleagues, so that you can read and then co-chairs can respond to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. The first question will go to Ms. Kara Williams, the other co-chair of the IAEG-SDGs. One of the challenges of data disaggregation, I'm assuming we have, oh, there she is. One of the challenges of data disaggregation to reflect intersectional inequalities fully is the cost. And this may vary significantly with the size of the population group. Is there any work underway to capture data on the costs of disaggregation for the SDGs or more broadly in different country contexts? Thank you.
Okay, Heather, this is an excellent question, and is a question that we're addressing in Canada. But I do want to start out with a bit of a generic statement. I believe in the first panel, it was noted that Paris 21 has put together a costing for sex disaggregated data for that countries could use. So there is that kind of generic there. But for country specific, I'm going to talk about the Canadian context, because this is a quite a big issue in Canada, because we have a very small population spread out over a very wide geography, and so it does cost, and that is one of the challenges that we face. So in the past, if a policy department is looking for information on a specific group for a survey, we will do a cost estimate of what that would be to be able to oversample that group and find out the geographies that they want, and then take that into our cost considerations. And it can be quite costly. Let's make no mistake about that. The other thing that we're doing is that we're talking to policy departments just more generally. Inclusion and diversity is big on the Government of Canada's agenda, but in order to address the policy needs for that, they do require that detailed information on vulnerable groups in Canada that are spread across wide geographies. And so with that in mind, we're having those concrete discussions with policymakers about what it would take for Statistics Canada to be able to disaggregate to the lowest levels possible, and the kind of costing that would require. So we talk about what are the priorities, because of course money is not never ending, and so we talk about, okay, so what are the highest priorities in certain areas? Which groups do you want to disaggregate by? And then what kind of disaggregation do you want with that group? Because it's not just about getting an estimate for that group, it's then disaggregating by all of those variables, right? And so that can mean significant sample increases. So it's having those really concrete discussions with policymakers about what their priorities are, and then what's doable from the National Statistics Office. It's also about looking at other opportunities. So small area estimation. Are there some things that can be done with small area estimation for some of the requirements for data disaggregation? So it really is. It's a multi-pronged conversation, and I think it's a conversation that has to be had not only with the policy departments responsible for certain areas, but at the highest levels of government as well, so that they understand that that the funding that's required to get the samples that are required is in place for the national statistics offices. So stay tuned, because we're working very, very hard on that with our policy partners in Canada to find out, okay, what is it exactly that you need, and how can we put that in place, and working in partnership with them. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. The next question goes to Albina. The question is, what are the entry points for the civil society organizations to engage and influence decision makers towards sustainable development and building government ownership on SDGs? Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear participants. As we know, during the development of SDG national platform, when we were doing data mapping for the indicator framework, civil society organizations were involved fully, and their major roles were to work in collaboration with national statistical offices in the area of dissemination and create awareness about the implementation of the SDGs in our countries. We're all aware about this one. Unless other countries, civil society organizations were not given chance to participate at the beginning of the process. For instance, for example, in Tanzania, the way we were, and even now, the engagement of the CSOs, we have engaged them from the initial stage when we were mapping the indicators. And we requested them to take the lead to disseminate the progress made, challenges and opportunities for the SDGs implementation. And of course, they were taking the same message. They are scaling down the message of SDGs at sub-level, at regional and district levels. So CSOs, they are working together with policymakers at that level, because they cannot go to the regional offices, to the district offices, where the evolution by decentralization is where it is. They have to engage the policymakers at that area. Let me stop there, and if there is any other thing, I'm ready to provide more examples. Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the next question back to Kara. Using other sources of data collected by NGOs, academic and research institutions to monitor the SDG progress, there is no official disaggregated data available for some communities, such as ethnic minorities, refugees, internal migrants, remote tribals, and some countries. And NGOs and other development partners do collect such data, but their data are often not included in national SDG monitoring reports. How do we resolve this? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. This is another excellent question. So there are a number of ways to address this, and the person who posed this question is absolutely right. And I talked about a little bit about this in the responding to the first question, when there wasn't a lot of disaggregated data available, and what it would take to get that disaggregated data through the National Statistics Office and their data collection. But for this one, talking about data from academia, civil society, etc., I think we need to talk about what can be other dissemination vehicles. So maybe those data don't go into the national report produced by the National Statistics Office, because the National Statistics Office can't necessarily guarantee the quality of that information. The data provided by these organizations may not have the data quality required by a National Statistics Office. It may not have the coverage required, and we don't for sure know, unless we validate that information, about the variance and the bias of that. But that's not to say that that data are not important, because they still are important. So things that can be done. Can there be links on a national platform, for instance, that link to other groups that are reporting data for SDGs? Are there other dissemination vehicles that can be used? Can there be shadow reports or shadow platforms that have that are noted to have other dissemination data sets from other groups? Could the National Statistics Office use some of that information in some of their other analytical products? And I'll give an example of something that Statistics Canada did earlier this year. We released a series of fact sheets on our Canadian indicator framework, our draft Canadian indicator framework and global indicator framework, where we had community spotlights in them. So the community spotlight focused on either data being produced for a specific that relates to a specific goal, or an action being taken by civil society in the area to achieve that goal. So there are ways to have that partnership. So one of the things that we say is maybe it doesn't get into the national report or the national platform by the National Statistics Office, but it doesn't make it not important information. And so looking to find ways to partner with academia or civil society is important because those data are important, but it not being on the national platform, there may be good reasons for that, because if it's published by the National Statistics Office, it can also often mean that there has been some sort of quality assessment by that NSO, and that may not have been done. So I will end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kara. Our last question, we'll go back to Albina. There is limited disaggregated data in many domains, such as with disability disaggregated data available in the health space. What are the gaps and opportunities to address this to enable better reporting on progress against the SDGs? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Of course, we do agree that disability disaggregated data availability in the health space is limited. Of course, we have seen the way Dr. Mohamedi was presented to us. Data gaps under this area include, of course, data disaggregation by geographical areas, poverty, theme, religion, and sometimes by race. This is an issue. To address these challenges of limited disaggregated data in many domains, IAEG, we will continue working in collaboration with custodian agencies and expert groups. We will provide all the support that is being required. And anyone who is interested to fill this gap is really welcome to work with this group. I thank you so much, Secretary. Over to you, Madam Hida.
Given the time that we are quite a bit over, I think we'll have to stop here. We welcome the questions whenever we do the registration for the meeting, so please continue to provide them, and we hope to address them as with the co-chairs as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, members and secretary. We are now closing our meeting. And let me say that on behalf of the IAEG-SDG group, we'd like to thank all the speakers for their participation and also all the attendees for joining us today. Thank you so much. As a reminder, all presentations and the recording will shortly be posted in the event page as usual. This is really what we normally do. Our next open event will take place in June this year, and we will send out information in advance similar to this event. Thank you once again, and please keep safe for your lives and for the people. Thank you so much, and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's closed off. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.